Hello and welcome to Pitch It, where you can do exactly that. You can pitch it, pitch your ideas. Maybe it's the blurb for your book, what you're working on, or just the concept, the synopsis. We're pretty flexible around here, but ultimately, we'll give you feedback about how your story is working, if you've captured our attention, and if you hooked us. But before we talk about some pitches, before we get to some pitches, I just wanted to give a suggestion on a good way to think about your pitch and really forming your story in the first place. And that is we often ask ourselves, what does the protagonist want in a story? There's this motivating force that is driving them to make all of their decisions and actions in the story. And that's obviously something you want to get in your pitch, right? You want to know what the protagonist is up to. But do not forget how, do not forget to include the antagonist as well. It's much more interesting if an antagonist versus, just being evil or villainous for the sake of being evil and villainous has some sort of motivating factor. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be opposite of the protagonist. It could be that the protagonist and the antagonist are just working cross purposes to each other. But if we've thought about that, if you thought about what does the antagonist want? Do they want love, relationship? Do they want money or like power in society or the answer to some sort of question or something like that? Then you will end up with a much more interesting conflict that informs your book than just necessarily a good versus evil. Not that that's a bad way to go about it. Certainly, successful works that are dealing with those sort of archetypes. But often you want to get into a little bit more depth and a little more detail about what is going on than just that. Well, I see so many friendly faces out there, and I'm sure you are excited to share some pitches. So I am not going to take any more time and I am going to get into some pitches here in our studio. So if anybody has a pitch, feel free to send it our way. And for those of you who are watching us on YouTube and you're like, well, I want to get involved in the fun, feel free to comment on YouTube and I'll look at pitches that we get through there. But I know you're limited on space and whatnot. So you can always join us here in our studio on our Zoom chat. And you can find that link at autocrit.com/live. So that's at autocrit.com/live if you want to join us. And I have Gareth here with me. How's it going out there, Gareth?
Hello. It's late.
Yes. It's late. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I know. Gareth is in a different time zone, so he is burning the midnight oil, or later than that, to join us. So, uh, so thank you very much, sir. So
Well,
anybody?
as David says there in the comments, unsure how to handle Daniel wearing a suit and tie. I am not wearing a suit and tie currently.
We don't really want to know what Gareth is wearing, I'm sure. So. There's a reason why his camera is off. All right, so we are going to get to pitches. If anybody has one, anybody out there have a pitch for us? And like I said, it doesn't have to be a fully formed blurb. We're okay with uh, high end sort of thing, even if it's just a quick, what would you think about a ballerina that's actually a secret agent? That's fine. Sounds kind of cool, actually. There you go, story prompt. Um, but anything out there from anybody? If there isn't, we can go a different direction with this. So
Hey, can you hear me? This is David.
yes,
Hey, all right. I'm still forming this idea, and I'm still trying to figure it all out. So it's a little raw here.
okay,
Um, but basically, there's a video game, Cyberpunk 2077. There's like a one scene where there basically there's a person injured. They take him out to the balcony, and this kind of hover ambulance comes in, and four guys with assault rifles come out and says, "This is my patient. Leave her alone, or we will just end you." And that just got me thinking about, in terms of having like there's a corporation out there that would be like that, and it kind of made me think about class warfare. The how the rich will be able to afford this while the poor and everything else. But it's basically I was kind of wanting to spent some time on that, where it's kind of a science fiction thing, where there's an ambulance that's both a medic and kind of a soldiers that's out to kind of help people, and do that. And like I said, it would kind of start to lead into this class warfare of the rich versus poor. The protagonist would be one of like the team leader who'd have to make a decision of, hey, is this truly the right thing to do? Am I really helping people, or am I really kind of hurting society with this? And that's kind of where it's going. Like I said, it's pretty raw right now.
No. That's that's interesting. Gareth, do you have any questions on the face of that from that pitch of like things you would want him to dive into while I pull up something here?
Well, there's a few things. I thought in Cyberpunk 2077 that was one of the coolest concepts that came up in that game, about that world. It's the trauma team. If you have the insurance, they can detect when you've incurred bodily trauma, and essentially they come in and take you off and give you medical treatment. But again, yes, it's like it's part of the whole corporate structure of that world. And yeah, they're fully armed. Yeah, it's super cool, and it's a good kind of idea. It got me thinking as well, that sort of thing. And I could, as you say, imagine it that your protagonist is the kind of person. It's the classic morality play there, where they have to make a decision that sort of understanding that what they're doing is not fair. Again, possibly like just leaving people to die, etc., because they don't have trauma team coverage, or even shooting people to get them out of the way of somebody who does, and having to reconcile that and go against. Well, then it turns into your kind of super cyberpunk thriller, where they're going against these massive corporate structures and discovering all the corruption and everything at the top of it. So I would say it's definitely the kind of idea worth developing. The initial development, I think I would probably do along those kind of standard thriller lines, and then start to ask yourself about, right, what can I do completely differently within this story structure than I would have, I would expect a thriller like this to go. Is what you always want to do is find these different angles, so you're not just writing something that's totally by the numbers. But certainly that kind of thriller has a structure, it has tropes and things that are perfectly fine to engage with, but I would lay it all out, get a story on your hands first with interesting characters, and then try to find ways that you can, turn it upside down.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when it comes to world building, it's kind of similar to the questions that I asked up front here on my on my antagonist, but similar, like the things I always ask, these are just really top level things in a world. Who's better off in this world, who's worse off in this world, who's gaining, who's losing, who's exploiting, and what's funny. What's funny about the situation? And people are like, "What?" And that's just because it just makes you think about it a little differently. What's mockable, what's silly about it. But yeah, if you think about it, another way of looking at it that I like to think about is what would break the system. Especially if you're talking about, it sounds like from your standpoint, it's a little bit of, Hunger Gamesy, or it's like maybe somebody against the system sort of thing. Potentially, I don't know where it's going, how epic it's going. It could be smaller. It could be more like a 1984, where it's somebody that doesn't really amount to much within the world. Um, but often I try to think of, what would break the system, because every system has its vulnerabilities, right? And that's either something you'll actually exploit and you will break the system, or you at least will have people attempting to do so within the system, or things like that. How are people gaming it one way or the other? And that just can get you to a little more depth as well. Because my only concern whenever I hear about pieces like that is it can get semi cartoony with the types of people involved, one way or the other. Because often systems like that, they're a utopia for some people, right? So they do have a motivating reason to keep it going, and it's not necessarily that they're all just mustache twirling villains exactly either, because once you get to a comfort level, there's a lot of risk and a lot of there's morality to deal with there. So it gets more interesting when you get a little deeper than that, if that makes sense.
It does, and I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I think it's really cool. And to Gareth's point, I think in addition to looking at it from a world building standpoint, what makes the world tick, how does that system work, things like that. To look at it from a structural standpoint, from a story, is incredibly smart. Because if you are building a thriller, to his point, you want to make sure you're hitting those emotional needs of the reader. Why does somebody like to read thriller? You kind of have to make sure you're hitting those sweet spots. So thank you though. But it's a cool idea. It's a cool
Well,
idea.
and,
And
and
I'm
this
not
kind of
familiar with the reference, and I still found it very interesting. So unlike Gareth, who understood what you were talking about, it was way over my head. But you described it in a way that I did understand what you were getting at. So you did a good job.
well, I appreciate that, and this kind of goes to the comment about it might be cartoony, because I think you're right. It could get there, but I'll admit I'm taking a Garrus horror class, and just some of the comments in that class, it just made me think, like, what if it got even worse? Like the trauma team
Mhm.
would go steal body parts, like a kidney. Their client
Mhm.
needs a kidney. Would they? How would that scene look out if it
Mhm.
got really gory there? So
Yeah.
it's
Well, yeah,
Well, I
there's
mean,
lots to be said in that as well. That
Mhm.
that kind of thing that can be alongside, that's part of the deep dark secret that he kind of discovers, and it again ties into the kind of social class commentary
right.
sort of going on there, that literally stealing,
Mhm. Yeah.
from the classes that
Right.
aren't covered and taking their body parts. That can get pretty grim, because something like that, yeah, you can go deep dark future, hard sci-fi, yeah, Blade Runner type stuff,
Yep.
or you can be more cartoony and have the explosive set pieces and
Mhm.
well, highly improbable laser guns and all these kind of things. So it really, yeah, it's open for all sorts of possibilities in the grimness factor.
Oh yeah, no, and I mean, and don't think when I say cartoony that's necessarily negative, because caricature has its purpose. Sometimes simplifying something down to its core elements has a there's a reason for it, and it's a highly effective way of doing art. So I'm not trying to say that it's not generally what I prefer to read necessarily. However, it can be highly effective. And I guess where I'm getting at with that, it's just make sure you know what audience you're trying to hit, right? Are you trying to hit the audience that's going to go for those sort of archetypes and the big sweeping sort of things? And like to Gareth's point, the big explosions and things like that. Or are you going to go more for the people that kind of want more of the debate, more of the 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 mesh of different ideas, challenge. Do you want to be challenged by it, or is it more of a way to satirize something? Both have perfectly valid reasons. They're just different. Does that make sense?
It does. Very good point. Thank you.
Mhm. All right. Do we have any other uh pitches out there? I see lots of people out here, so feel free to join in and to
And
like.
again, yeah, even if it's not a fully formed
Yeah,
pitch,
even
just
if it's not a
ideas.
fully formed, even if it's just a nugget. David was talking about a nugget of an idea he has that he's trying to develop. So that is fine. It does not have to be a fully formed novel or a story arc or anything like that. Look and see if there's anything out on YouTube.
I have something
All
that's
right.
a partial.
Yeah, go ahead, Celissa.
Okay, this is a completed manuscript. It's the latest in my cozy mystery series.
Okay.
So the heroine or main character Sierra is currently with a group of older women taking them on tour, and one of the women has been arrested for murder, and so she's not fighting it, but she is expecting Sierra to prove her innocence. So it's like all of a sudden, oh boy, all of a sudden it's all dumped on her to find the truth, ask the questions, and because she has been known to be around a few dead bodies here and there in the past in other books. So, I think that's part of the reason why, and it happens to be the mother of her best friend. So I'm trying to find a funny twist to it though, because while I know murder is murder and it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
gory and I love it, but it's still my
I've
cozy
spoken like a true
surroundings.
cozy mystery writer.
Yeah,
Murder
there's a
is
lot of
murder, but
humor.
I love it.
There's a lot of humor there, but
Sure.
I've just been trying to find, I was attended the workshop this earlier today about the taglines and stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, I've got to start working on this. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether to come from Sierra's point of view or to come from Kathleen's point of view of like, come on, Sierra, I trusted you to get me out of this mess, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of stumped a little bit. Any thoughts?
So you're trying to figure out a humorous angle to the situation, right?
That's my preference, yeah.
And you
But
said you have, and the main, I'm just trying to track this. The main conflict besides the solving the mystery is what specifically?
uh, she's with a group of older women, and she's been called over to Hawaii. How convenient! And she's
And
supposed to
has she
take
been to
them.
Hawaii before?
No,
Okay, all right, keep
no, and
going.
yet here she is supposed to, because Kathleen's been, this is a travel group of older ladies. They're all in their 60s or so.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's Sierra, who's 28, 29 years old, never been to Hawaii. And she was really hoping just to be able to sit in the sun and drink Mai Tais. And that is
Mm-hmm.
not the way this trip is ending up at all.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
the
well, I
best,
mean, you've got some conflict there, a potential for humor in terms of you have fish out of water sort of things. Somebody hasn't been to
yeah.
a place they've
Oh,
been before. Generation gap stuff, right? Because they're out of touch with each other because they have a very different sort of lifestyle. So certainly there, I would say you have opportunity for humor. I mean, beyond just the fact that you're going to throw a murder in there to make it interesting. I mean, whole stories have been done about just random Joe Blow 20 something ends up with random Joe Blow 70-year-old and they learn from each other. It works. So what I would try to do is find works like that and look at some of the methods that they use to make that really jump off the page. Gareth, did you have any thoughts?
that's some good ideas. Thank you.
I'm wondering about the trying to piece the whole plot structure behind in my head. There
Mm-hmm.
is she when she's on tour with the group of older ladies. Is she forced to drag all of them with her to Hawaii?
Actually, they got there first. And then there was and then her friend Joan called her over to come and help her out. Joan is her best friend. And so it's her mother, Joan's mother's and her friends. So there's the generation different mother-daughter thing going on there.
Okay.
So
What's the nature of the tour? Is she heading it up?
she has been put in charge of it because Kathleen, the one who's been is a person of interest for murder, is very organized and has it all planned out. And so they just want Sierra, that's my character's name, to do all the, I mean, she's never been there, but it's Kauai. There's only one road. It's not like you can get lost on the island. So, it's
I
easy
like that.
enough
That's
to
already pretty
do.
funny.
This is
But
kind of
no, and
you want to dump all this tour stuff on top of me to handle, and now you also want me to solve a murder
but
because
this
you're in trouble.
also is a group of ladies that are all into going out to happy hour and all this kind of stuff. And yet Kathleen is still expecting her to have time to ask questions and nose around and all this kind of stuff to help figure out who else was there at the scene of the crime.
Now,
Hmm.
the
I was
crime involves somebody on the murder tour, right?
No,
Oh,
the
okay.
person killed is not a local, but someone who has lived there for a couple years.
Okay.
Someone that they had met on the beach.
Interesting. See, I was
And
thinking it was like
kind
Murder on the Orient Express, and you had a
yeah.
well,
limited group of suspects, and you're like, which one of
so
these 60-year-old ladies offed somebody else on this tour?
well, it it it
I was
kind
going to
of
say that
Because
that
that
could
sounds way
actually
more.
factor in because you kind of think that, and perhaps that is where a lot of the comedy comes from. You can use these other characters as comedic foils, where maybe the things they're up to, there's one or two complete lush, almost alcoholics who are just constantly drunk and getting into trouble. And she's trying to wrangle them. Meanwhile,
yeah.
others are starting to look a bit shifty, and there's misunderstandings and kind of situational comedy in there could really factor in. I think if you want to do comedy too, there's something, again, it's the thing I always like to see is the obligation. I think like the obligation to solve to solve a murder and get me out of trouble because nobody else believes me,
Yeah.
simply because we have a personal connection in some way is just hearing the story is not defined for me. So You need something super strong in the obligation, and that could even be something funny. Is you owe me for X in the past, and you can't just walk away from that.
Yep.
I also like the
Also,
idea of maybe each person, she'd be surprised to find that each of these other ladies would also have a reason for killing this guy. So
yes.
that
See,
was
I
that.
like that idea because then it
Ooh,
becomes claustrophobic as she's going around and she's starting to be suspicious that she's actually like aiding the fleeing of the crime from somebody because one of them might have been involved. Yeah,
Yeah, again, you get situational comedy in that, like, and
Mhm.
one of them was just alone in a room with my drink and is acting kind of shifty
Mhm.
from my perspective, but there's
Right.
really nothing. There's really nothing
Right.
going on, but the
Oh.
characters are also paranoid
Mhm.
that maybe
Yeah.
there is.
That can be really fun, especially with the characters involved, right? To be incredibly suspicious of, you know, uh retiree group of women there's just a lot of room for a lot of fun with that, especially because you have generation gap stuff too, so different things can be misinterpreted. And with a cozy mystery, more than likely I would think your audience is going to be of closer to the retiree age and not the 20 something, so it'll be funny for them to read how a 20 something might misinterpret things that they would do as suspicious when it's really not.
and I like that, and I am trying to incorporate more of that. And I see the one note. Yes, Howleys. Yep, there are a group of Howleys on the island. Yes, indeed. But their train of thought is so different. Their reasoning for doing things just leaves Sierra just totally stunned. It's like,
Hmm.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
That has been there, and
Yeah.
for her, it's like herding cats. It's still not fun, not even
Yeah.
on Hawaii.
The other
So
thing I can think of that might make it interesting, and I think of getting to Spider-Man, the very Spider-Man movie where he ends up on this trip in Europe and then he keeps getting pulled aside to do something that he's not particularly interested in because he's trying to have a romantic evening with a, a classmate and then he keeps getting pulled off on all these special things. So I almost think that I don't know if you have, but your protagonist should have something perhaps that they would rather be doing or maybe could be doing on the island or perhaps or something like that. And that gives that extra pain of them being pulled away from it rather than I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating, but you know. That worked out very well in that film for that reason. So I'm just thinking of that sort of idea. It's that extra pain.
mhm.
Night Monkey, yes. It was Night Monkey, yeah. Because he ends up saving them from an accident at a Ferris wheel, and he keeps really poorly trying to convince people he's not Spider-Man by making up crazy other things. Yes.
I haven't seen that movie yet, but I want to.
Spider-Man Far From Home is very fun because it takes on a lot of characteristics of a John Hughes movie, which the director made all the cast watch. So it feels it's very different sort of story sort of structure. It's not like a big epic. It's really like a teen comedy that happens to have superheroes in it. All right, so
Thank you. It's
I
a
have
great
one.
oh,
idea.
what'd you
Thank
say,
you, Sarah.
Linda?
I said I have one maybe to
Oh,
talk to
cool,
you about.
awesome. Yes, go ahead, Linda.
Is that all right?
Yep.
I have a trilogy. It's called The Journey of the Jade Ring,
Okay.
and it's set historically. It spans several centuries. It follows a jade ring uh, with the same two people. Their lives are reincarnated.
Okay.
Okay. So the adventure begins with this 7-year-old orphan,
Mm-hmm.
and he goes with a brilliant teacher, and he learns all kinds of talented things. He becomes an inventor. This is set in 500 BC in China,
Okay.
and then the ring. He has the ring as a 7-year-old,
Okay.
and so the ring guides him to a marriage, and then this person that he's married to, he's been married to before in another life,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's the same two lovers are reunited each time. Um, they are very steeped in the Chinese tradition, and then the consequences of karma comes along and gives them a lot of heartburn.
Okay. Interesting. So each one of these books is the same two personalities in different bodily form in different eras. Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay.
That's it.
All right. Um, do you have thoughts, Gareth, before I contribute?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that one.
Oh, I was asking Gareth if he has
Oh,
thoughts before I contribute.
Oh, that's no. I'll let you run with it. I was just wondering if it's multiple books. Are they all so? Each book is its own self-contained story.
yes, it could be. It could be. It's just the same ring shows up, and the two people are the same lovers.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'll let you run on, Daniel.
Okay, so so I guess the one thing that I'm a little bit confused about just from your description is the the audience. Is this primarily romance? Is that what you would call it? Is it primarily like adventure? Is it like primarily like mystery? I'm trying to, because are they are they aware? Well, obviously in the first book. So in the first book, are you seeing the beginning of this cycle, or are you
Yes,
okay? So the first book is the beginning of this cycle, right? And you
right.
say that this ring leads this character to make certain decisions, right? So is the first book kind of a mystery story about the ring itself, or is that not really the point? Is it really more about like the romance? Are they going to get together? Are they not going to get together? The odds of the world against them, or whatever it is.
I wouldn't say it is. I wouldn't say it's mystery.
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward that the ring is going to guide him
Okay.
to this person.
Okay.
Um, it might not be the person that he would have chosen,
Okay.
but her father thinks that because he's a talented inventor, he can manipulate him if he marries his daughter to him.
Okay.
And so it turns out that she is the right person, and the ring
Okay.
knows it.
Okay. So initially the character is encouraged by this ring to go after somebody that he's not sure about. And then that sort of works itself out. I guess I'm trying to, like I said, I'm just trying to figure out, I see where the hook could be interesting. I'm just trying to get more of an idea of story structure in terms of where's the tension coming from in the story, if that makes sense. Um, you talk about karma. So is this kind of a thing where the characters, in order to get what they want, are making somewhat selfish choices, and then in the next life it kind of hits them or something like that? Is that what you mean?
No,
Okay.
the choices that uh, the male character he is driven by the fact that you always do good.
Okay.
You always um, um, what you do in this life prepares you for the next life. So if you
Right.
do good things, then you're gonna have a good next life.
Right.
If you do bad things, then you're gonna suffer.
Okay.
And that sort of idea of karma. So he's an inventor, and the bad guy comes along and makes him invent war machinery,
Okay.
because the Chinese are in. This is back in the
Yeah.
spring and autumn
I
period,
gotcha.
and so he's torn because they're gonna kill his wife's family and his wife
Okay.
if he doesn't do these war machines.
Okay.
And so he capitulates, and he makes the war machine,
Okay.
and then he suffers terrible consequences of that.
Okay. So because he's complicit in, even though he is not somebody who is negatively motivated, because he is complicit in something that is negatively motivated, he bears the consequences. Now, because of the way karma works, do those consequences not come into play until the second book or the second part of the story, or or does karma already start to affect him in the first life?
Yeah, yeah, it gets
It
him in
starts to
the end.
affect him. Okay. So, all right. So that almost sounds more like it's almost kind of like a political or a war drama or something like that. So that gives me a different complexion on the type of thing that it is. So my concern with it, with the way you're talking about it, is just whether or not the tension point is quite um, obvious enough, but it could just be the way you're describing it. So I wouldn't know unless I looked at it. But um, the idea of somebody being, kind of forced at gunpoint to be complicit in a system that they don't agree with, and then having to bear the brunt of that, even though they didn't agree in the first place, I could see that being quite compelling, depending on where you went with it. So I definitely see the strength in that. Um, I'm not sure how that factors into the whole ring thing, because if the ring has some sort of, I don't know how to put it, supernatural sort of quality that it led him to his wife, is there a reason why the ring wouldn't be able to assist him with this sort of moral decision? Like how to navigate this? Does it fail him in this? And it's like, does it then kind of almost become like a crisis of faith sort of story? You know what I mean? Like I'm a little bit confused about the ring's power, because if the ring has the power to lead you to somebody that you want to, well, you don't want to get married to, but might be the right person for you, then I'm wondering why it's not helping him later. And that's almost like that's the big question I would have if I were him. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And maybe it's just because I'm misunderstanding what you meant by the power of the ring, but
well, maybe my problem is trying to describe it.
yeah.
Um, oh, okay. I'll
Does
have
that
to
make
think
sense? I
on
mean, maybe this is something to think about, it's not like a plot hole, because like it could be that that's the whole point, is that the ring only helps you somewhat, and then the rest of it you have to do yourself, and it kind of becomes a story about that as well. And like I said, it becomes almost like an interesting religious sort of situation where it's, I don't know.
Yeah, it only helps him do good stuff. It doesn't help him do bad stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. So okay. Anyway, any thoughts, Gareth?
No, much the same along the lines of Daniel. I think I just need to understand how all of these things blend together as a single cohesive concept a little more. So it's maybe just getting that narrowed down as much as possible, where I could understand the idea. I think that is a very good idea. That kind of moral quandary of the main character, who's basically forced into creating machines of war that he really doesn't want to do. And again, the ensuing karmic ramifications of that within that philosophy is very interesting. But I don't understand where the kind of power of the ring fits in here, even in perhaps a fantastical sense. Maybe brings that more to the front, and the reincarnation thing across multiple times, like these souls reborn to do the thing. I just wonder why. I don't think I've ever seen or read reincarnation stories done well, in ways that I certainly appreciated anyway. But somebody's mentioned, Jonathan there in the comments, things like World Atlas, and Darren Aronofsky's film The Fountain, which was just not to my taste whatsoever. But it's just kind of like, how does it come together in a conceptual sense, as a story mechanism, rather than just something that happens? What is the significance of that?
Yeah, for reincarnation done well, the first thing that comes to mind is Kubo and the Two Strings, um, which is a stop motion animated film, but has a lot of very interesting Eastern mythology to it, and it's worthwhile. Even though
I do know my wife absolutely loved that one. but I have not watched it. So
Yeah. That's just the first thing I thought of when I thought of reincarnation done well. And that sort of belief structure done well. It was very
It's
thought thought.
sort of on the line of Time Traveler's Wife,
I'm
where he kind of comes and goes out
uh-huh.
of
I can
out of different.
yeah,
I can kind of see where you might be going with that. Yeah. Yeah, my concern when you say trilogy is just when I think something like that, my thought of anything that requires multiple books to tell, there's like two ways of going about it. It's either because the main character is just so fun and fascinating, and I think of like cozy mystery sort of things where it's to kind of set up the character is fun to watch, and then each book is quite different in terms of their setting and placement and stuff like that. But then the other reason to do a series is because the hero journey is just so massive you can't put it into one book. They have to go from here to here, and it's just to do that justice you need the space. And I didn't really get either of that from what you were talking about. So it was a little bit confusing to me. But like Gareth was saying, I definitely like the conflict involving the war and things like that. I could see that working out well. So there's definitely a lot of good ideas in there. I don't feel it coming together with the way you were describing it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any others? Maybe we can do a couple
I've
more.
got one.
Okay, go ahead.
This is Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
So I was at the deep dive this morning and listened to them talk about blurbs. And so this was a blurb that I had written prior to the deep dive this morning, but I'm like to just read it here.
Sure.
This is it's a romance novel.
Cool.
And starts, I'm a badass. I can do this. I don't need anyone, really, especially not Craig Benoit. I escaped my abusive mom when I was 15. I survived on the streets for 2 years. I'm great at taking care of myself. But when I was 17, I met my fairy godfather, Saul, and he changed the trajectory of my life. My mentor, my friend. Maybe it's okay to let people in. But the fairy tale didn't last, so I did what I do best. I ran. Made a new life thousands of miles away and kept my heart safe. But now Saul's dead and I need to go home. I just hope my heart can withstand one more loss. Blue Taylor was everything I never knew I dreamt of. Nothing like the skinny blonde society girls I'm expected to date. Burgundy hair, black leather, and a foul mouth. I wanted her from the moment I saw her. I thought we had a shot, but somehow we screwed it up. It's been years since I've seen her, but Uncle Saul's death means she's back in my life, and Saul's decided to make it difficult for us. We need to fix what's broken, but just because I believe in happily ever after doesn't mean she does.
Okay. Gareth, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, it sounds interesting. So there's a nice bit of fantasy wrapped in there, that's kind of hidden below things. It's strange. I am not sure, and I'll have to keep looking around if I've seen blurbs written in first person like that very, very often. Even if the book is in first person, I'm not sure it's too often to see that. The whole thing itself feels maybe a little too long for a blurb to be going on the back. It felt more like it's very well written. It felt like you were reading a section of a first chapter to me, like it was the opening. Good voice, definitely things going on there. And I think for a blurb, I would want to know more about I think what Daniel always mentions, that core conflict of what's going to happen. What is it we need to overcome here? Really the big stuff. Give me a notion of that and what kind of threat it may offer, because the blurb there is kind of a setup. But if you leave me tailing at the end of it with a hint of the conflict, the big conflict to come, these are things I like to call, no matter the genre, something called the great threat is what is the big thing you're dealing with. And just because I use grandiose terminology like that doesn't mean it actually has to be like a nuke or some kind of planet about to hit the Earth, stuff like that. But yeah, just keep that in mind and think of it, and then at the end, just kind of trail off with a hint of what the main character, I would say if we're reading in first person like that, may suffer if that conflict is not overcome. So I need to think, oh, that sounds like something that's going to be exciting, and there's real stakes here, and then I want to read the book.
Yeah, with me, I was a little confused by your weaving in the fantasy references because I couldn't quite get a handle on if this is truly even going that direction or if this is just the character speaking with that sort of vernacular. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't it was hard for me to tell if you were getting at, well, this is actually going to have kind of a foot in fantasy to some extent, or if this is, you're just using that sort of verbiage because that's the framework that this person uses in their life. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So when you
yeah.
said like fairy godfather, I like wasn't sure. I'm guessing you don't mean that they actually are a fairy godfather, right? They just kind of took that role in that person's life. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's more the
It's more the vernacular, right? But I feel like,
vernacular than
yeah, I feel
actual
like it
fantasy.
wasn't. It wasn't. I assumed that with the way it was that you were just saying life's not a fairy tale. I grew up with this framework. Grew up reading these stories, whatever it is. And I use that as kind of like my language for describing emotion and all of that. So that's fine, but I felt like it was a little bit unclear for me. Obviously, if you have something like book cover title, it would be clearer that it's not, but because usually you clue on it's there. But I would be concerned if it's maybe not. I mean, also, it probably does put it in quotes, so that helps too. And I can't hear that. So, um, but yeah, because obviously if it says fairy godfather, then it's like, okay, I getcha. But other than that, yeah, to Gara's point, you have clear characters, so I have a sense of who she is, I have a sense of who he is, and I have a sense of why there might be difficulties from an emotional standpoint. It's not quite clear enough to me what the thing that's going to bring them apart are, one way or the other. And the other thing is what kind of genre is this? Would you call it this it's like a drama, right?
It's kind of edgy romance.
Mhm. Yeah.
Not, not the bodice ripper kind of thing, not the
Yeah. Okay.
28-year-old virgin kind of romance
No, no,
novel.
no. Right. I get that. Okay. All right. But it's not like I'm just use shorthand. It's not like Nicholas Sparksy either. It doesn't sound like.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
no. She is Blue, the main character is, she's lived on the streets. She's, she's smart, but she's
Mhm.
not she's just barely not feral.
Yeah, because I just know, and you probably know from romance that a lot of romance is um somewhat comfort, so audiences often don't even want to read any romances that don't end in a happily ever after and things like that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite clear from your blurb where that was fitting. If that was fitting kind of in the standard with your own twist, make it a little edgier of typical romance, or if it was going more in the direction of like, for lack of a better word, literary fiction romance. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, it ends in a happily ever after.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
She
obviously you keep
sorts
the
all of it
audience
out.
on edge about that, but I okay, cool.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, in general, like to Garrett's point, the voice is very strong, and romance, that's key. That's a lot of romance is voice, since story structure usually is not terribly complicated. It's a lot more about character and voice, which you did very well. So,
Thank you.
speaking as somebody that doesn't read a lot of romance blurbs, I saw a lot of potential in it. I don't think we have a specific order. Did you have something, Jonathan?
It's sort of a premise.
Okay.
I'm trying to develop it more. I'm working on a few different sort of short stories right now.
Okay.
I mean, as you know, like I'm very influenced by tight, efficient, Philip K. Dick, Asimov, Bradbury kind of storytelling.
Mhm.
So this
Those are
one's
easy
called,
shoes to fill in too, so no pressure there.
sure, I'll just hop right in those. Right up in there. I had sort of this kind of a weird idea about the story for right now is called The Negotiator. And the main premise is there's this sort of disgraced Olympic pistol shooting champion. And it's sort of a generic disgrace. It could be drugs or something else.
Okay.
But it's implied that he's very skilled, but he's done. His Olympic career is done.
Okay.
And he's trying to sort of make ends meet. And he's brought in one way or the other into this kind of shady world where we find out as the readers that the age-old tradition, which is not really around anymore, of dueling, that we thought has gone away because we've become civilized, has not really gone away.
Dun, dun, dun.
And that it's actually through these one-on-one duels where the largest of these kind of business decisions, like mergers, acquisitions, hostile takeovers, are decided. And I was involved in this kind of thing in terms of not like shooting or anything, but like, M&As and things like that when I worked in Japan.
Uh-huh.
And to be honest, when I came up with this, I was like, man, it'd just be easier if they would just have representatives of both parties just show up and duel to the death. But this is kind of kept secret from the rest of society.
Mm-hmm.
And he's brought into this, and he starts to get fairly proficient, and he's facing off against representatives of companies that are, ex mercenaries or, ex special ops, but none of them are really true shootists. And but he, on the other hand, is not, this kind of tough ex-military person either. He's just an Olympic shooter.
Okay.
And the conflict is that he's hired by the CEO of we say in Japan, a zaibatsu company, which is a company in Japan that is usually tied to a central bank. Very large corporations, mega corporations in Japan, who has done a bit of through self-serving trickery and to please his stockholders, has arranged this duel, but he wants the protagonist to lose, and he's going to be paid off by the other side and just go away somewhere. And so he's supposed to take and it doesn't necessarily mean that if you lose, you die. I mean, if you're just wounded or something, but he doesn't lose. And now he's going to be on the run from everybody. And that's really the
Does he
main
not
thing.
lose does he not lose on purpose? Or is it an
the way
accident?
I have it structured now is that he's told, like a boxer, take a dive, and we'll take care of you, but take a dive. But he doesn't. And he doesn't understand the true implications of that. He's still very new to the world.
Interesting.
And he's prideful or whatever. And this is sort of again a way of him to redeem himself in his own eyes after this disgrace.
Gotcha.
And anyway, I thought it'd be a cool premise, but I think I need to tighten it up a bit. Instead of just having it be duelists, I'd say like the duelists are not called duelists. It's not called it. They're called negotiators. So that's
now,
the main thing.
I mean, well, actually, I'll let Gareth. I'll get Gareth to jump in here.
Story of the negotiators of murders and executions. It's yeah, I think like you say, it's a really fun premise. I think that's a really good setup for something, but as you're describing it, I'm still trying to figure out what it's saying, what's at the core of it, that kind of means anything, except for characters operating within the confines of a really cool premise. It's kind of about the corporate world of the structure, because it seems like what it's really saying as you described it there was sitting in meetings and going, man, wouldn't it just be easier if they just shot at each other and get it over with, which again doesn't really give me a whole lot to ride with the protagonist. and what he has to then face later on with the weight of it on his shoulders and everything else.
Yeah.
But I do kind of like the idea.
I guess where I struggled a bit, Jonathan, was you started out where the protagonist was a disgraced Olympian, right? He was the champion at his craft, a professional marksman or whatever, and now everything that he had, what he was best at, his identity was taken away from him, right? So you're starting him a very low place. So that's good. But I guess where I struggle with is the connection between that and this world. So I'm trying to figure out how you string that together to where does that make sense? Like then it's like what kind of thing is it? Is it become a story about how he kind of needs to move away from that being his identity because now the only way he can get his kick being a marksman is this nefarious dark world sort of thing, or is it um
Yeah,
you
no,
know what
I
I
know what
mean?
you
I'm trying
mean.
to figure out
Yeah,
what the motivation is for him to be within this world because that really informs what it has what the ultimate meaning is. Does that make sense?
Well, I actually think that works quite well in terms of him initially being disgraced, and what you said at the end there. I think just the title of it is just great as well. If it was just called The Negotiator,
Mm-hmm.
but that kind of sets him up as you could see the trajectory of initially disgraced, but he finds himself back on the top of the mountain when he's the hottest in town of people you can hire to make sure you're successful at these negotiations. He is the negotiator. It's the guy you bring in.
Right.
That's really super cool. But then you'd get to that point of his pride is what forces him to not take the dive, so to speak. But there's a lot more to work with around that needs work. Ironing that out is why take the contract. Why is there no kill clause in the contract to start with? Is like, well, instead of taking the dive, how about I just don't do it, and then you lose by default.
so the way
within
that
these
I've
rules.
thought about this in a very basic way, and those are very good points, is this is a different kind of addiction. So the way that I framed it before is that he's busted for drugs or something like that, and now
Mhm.
he's done with Olympics, right? The only way that he can ply his craft is through this world that he's being brought into. But now it's kind of an addiction now,
Mhm.
that it's this rush of filling up his ego.
Mhm.
And so you're right, he doesn't need to take the contract, and he might even have that internal, I'm just not going to take this. This is stupid. But then he's just sort of looking at the piece of paper. What else am I going to do?
Mhm.
And but then the stakes get higher. Is that he's now involved in this? He doesn't take the dive. This is pride talking,
Mhm.
but now now he's really playing with the bigger pieces. This is his life,
Mhm.
and over the course of the story, he starts to regain his humanity through navigating these challenges and trying to come out on the other side alive and understanding why he got into it wasn't the right reason. Just overall, that's how I'd structure it. But you're right, it's going to take a lot of sort of
Yeah, I
teasing
think
those
it's
elements
I
out.
think it's really great up until the dive, and then I'm just trying to figure out where you go from there.
Yeah, there's kind of two branches there. I'm thinking because one of them you have this kind of high octane thriller
Mhm.
corporate stuff. He's on the run, and then you've got corporate. Let's say at that point in a society like that, more than likely mercenary groups and things like that are
Mhm.
tasked after this guy, and he's holed up. They've made a mistake going after this, and I think part of the downfall would be at that point in the story, highly egotistical ex-shooter or Olympic shooter who I don't necessarily want to be on the side of at that point, unless you spend some significant time rebuilding him after the event. Perhaps they do something terrible to him and dump him afterwards, and then he rebuilds, but they won't leave him alone because he's supposed to be dead.
Vengeance. Yeah.
Yeah, that might be it. Otherwise, at the end of the day, for something like that's a shorter story too, if you went that route, it could just outright be a tragedy of pride comes before a fall. He should not have taken the contract, but his ego gets the best of him, and the chips fall where they do.
Yeah, I
Right
mean,
on.
it could be one of those things where he can't bring himself to not take the fall, and then that's basically where the story ends, where it's just like you know, and they found the body a few days later. You know, you just leave it there. You know, because that's what he made. He could not. His addiction would not allow him to fulfill that contract, and you know, so
Thanks, guys.
yeah, possibly not super rewarding, but I could see it working though. This depends.
That's the kind of dark thing, as I always say about Sean Penn's movie, The Pledge, is almost just like that. His own addictions and ego lead him to make a promise that he cannot possibly fulfill, and he stuffs it up and is destroyed by the end of that film.
Yeah,
So.
it kind of reminds me of like The Firm, sort of desperate person mixing in with the wrong sort of people sort of story. Also tying into business and underworld stuff. All right, cool. We don't do boring is the yoga posse motto, but does that include getting away with murder? I like it. It's cute. What do you think, Gareth?
It's catchy. Yeah, I quite like it.
Yeah. It tells you quite a bit about it, you know. Sure. The only thing is that you could add an additional adjective to the yoga posse motto to indicate that they're retirees, if that's the age group. So I don't know what that would be. All right, so we got some great pitches. Is there anybody out there that wants to sneak in before we close this up? All right, sounds good. Well, we will be back here next Tuesday, or at least I'll be here. I'm not sure if Gareth will be here. It's late night for him, but I'll be here next Tuesday at 7 p.m. for more pitches. So feel free to continue to work on stories, work on ideas, so you can bring them to us, and we can have these fun discussions. I love it. I love having these sort of discussions. It's super exciting, and tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I will be doing my writer aerobics, which is their bring back the Minecraft shirt. Is that what you call that other shirt? Interesting. My little 8-bit shirt. It will come back because I usually wear it for wacky words. But 9 a.m. we'll do writer aerobics, which is just a 15-minute quick little exercises to get you into the writing mood, to kind of start your day off. And then at noon tomorrow, we'll have wacky words, which are fun word puzzles like cryptograms and rebuses and things like that. Just a fun little activity to do. Thursday at noon, I will be doing a writer lens on WandaVision, the show that just concluded on Disney Plus. Had a lot of interesting character work, mystery work, fan service, fan disappointments, lots of things to talk about in terms of that as a whole, and what and things to learn about it. Very interesting creative work that took a lot of bold choices that was interesting to follow. So, anything from you, Gareth?
No, I will be around where I can. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening. All right. Good night, everybody. Bye.